Yeah, so hey, welcome. My name's Matt Finlay from Brian Perry Civil. I'm the Delivery Improvements Manager, and it's wonderful to be able to get together and talk to a really interesting topic and really relevant to where we are in our sustainability journey as an industry. So I would like to start just with a quick karakia, which can help bring us together. Tuatawa mai I ranga. Tuatawa mai I raro, tuatawa mai I roto, tuatawa mai I waho, kia tuao, ki mori tu, te mori ora, ki te kato, humie, huie, tahiki e. So thank you for that. That's just a great way to acknowledge coming together, centering ourselves and acknowledging, our great collective place of Aotearoa and our sustainability journey here together. So what brings us together today, EPDs is a topic that's really evolving for us as an industry and our understanding of that. And I'd like to start with an acknowledgement. My own journey around understanding a lot of these tools has come from involvement with the enterprise model and the water care model of bringing together water care, the design partners, the construction partners, and the supply chain has really brought us on a journey of looking to understand how do we bring these international baselines together along with our locally manufactured products, and the role of EPDs in really unpacking for us, well, how does that connection of both the forward-looking baseline and then the actual produced EPDs and the decision-making that goes along with that has been a really interesting journey. So working with the Water NZ Climate Change Group, it was quite obvious that it's a topic that we could all do with understanding a little bit more about. So today is very much about the fundamentals. If you're a environmental specialist and you work in this space, this is very much a 101 for all of us who are just starting out. But it's wonderful to have a cross-section of presenters talking about their experience to date. And our aspiration here is really to promote the conversation so that we can be learning from each other. We're certainly recording the session. If you have questions on the way through, then do pop those into the Q&A function, and we'll have a bit of a moderated Q&A towards the end. Another quick connection I'd love to draw is the Navigating to Net Zero document, which I hope you may have seen, or if you haven't, it's definitely worth a look on the Water NZ website. And this is the product of a lot of connected thought into the global sustainability aspiration, but grounding it in a New Zealand context for us in terms of the water industry. And it's the product of the Water NZ Climate Change Group a couple of years ago. But as per this table here, our aspiration coming back to this bottom point that I've started to say, hey, our literacy and our understanding at an industry-wide level, the more we can draw together our connection and collective understanding, the better we can have this conversation. So we have a range of different roles and responsibilities, from our leadership to our technical, particularly across into the supply chain. But with such a big complex challenge as climate change, the more we can do to come in terms of common ground, the better served we are. So I'd certainly point you to that document if you haven't seen it. It's got a great roadmap for us and a great starting point for understanding how we tackle the climate change challenge. And my final slide is to introduce our speakers today. So from Fletcher Building, we have Farhan, who is going to talk about the Fletcher Building journey into EPDs and give us really the basics of what they are. Tony Haycock from Green Vision is going to talk about particularly special from a recycled product perspective. So excited to have Tony share their story to date. And then Conrad is going to share from an Auckland Council client perspective what the current thoughts are in terms of how that might play out in terms of client baselining, etc. So without further ado, Farhan, if you wouldn't mind just joining us, and I will hand over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Matt. Let me start by sharing a screen to make sure everything works as it should. Share. There you go. Matt, can you see it? Just give me a thumbs up. Cool. Cool. Ko Montserrat te maunga, ko Llobregat te awa, ko de Miguel Mercader toku whanau, ko Ferran toko ingoa. So thank you very much for having me today. And as Matt said, I'll just have a really brief 101 on embodied carbon and EPDs today. So what we'll present today is what are emissions and embodied carbon, what is an environmental product declaration, an EPD, what is Fletcher Building doing about our embodied carbon, and what are our customers asking on it around this topic. So where do our emissions come from? So when you think about carbon emissions, you think about the fuel that we put in our cars or the jet fuel that goes in power planes, burning coal to produce electricity, our emissions from our industrial sites, or our emissions from agriculture. So those are our direct emissions. There is also other factors. This is just some examples, but this is where we normally think of carbon emissions. This is what we think of. But how about the things we buy? So when you buy a car, so not the fuel that you put in the car, but the car itself, there is some associated carbon emissions to manufacturing and bringing it to your garage. The same as in when you buy anything, when you buy a laptop or when you buy a piece of steak, we normally say that agriculture has emissions. How does that translate into the thing that you actually buy? Or all the pipes that are all around New Zealand to distribute water everywhere. Or in case, something very relevant to us as Fletcher Building is also building houses and all the materials that go into it. So what are the associated carbon emissions to build a thing or a material or to do a project? So this is what we normally define as embodied carbon. And in terms of a material, this is where it's displayed in an EPD, an environmental product declaration. So just the fundamentals, what is an environmental product declaration? It's a document showing transparent and comparable environmental information, including embodied carbon, but it's not the only thing. It's a really much more comprehensive document. It is science-based, standards compliant, and independently verified. By this, I mean it's a really robust document. It follows ISO standards and many other standards along the way. It has data from the entire life cycle assessment, and I'll talk a little bit more about life cycle next. And it's a snapshot in time. This means that an EPD tells you what's the environmental impacts of this product like right now. This means that an EPD needs to be updated. So you normally have it an update every 5 years. But if in the meantime, those impacts have changed more than 10%, you are required to update it too. An EPD does not judge a product. It's not like other certifications like environmental choice that tells you this product is better in its category. An EPD does not judge, it just provides information. But because it follows a specific number of standards, you can actually compare it with others in a fair and equitable basis. So it's very much a disclosure document. So how do you go about making one? And this is a very, very 101. Hopefully in the upcoming webinars, we will have a much better explanation on how you go about one. But basically, so you put a lot of information in terms of energy use, fuel, heat, water, how much waste is generating, what's the pollution that you do while you are creating a product, which materials you use, what's your process, what's the manufacturing process, and also how you go about moving things up and down from raw materials to the product. So you collect all that information from the entire life cycle of a product and you put it into a computer model. Then this computer model does its thing and ends up giving you indicators. And it gives you like the indicators of a product during its life cycle. So what are their impacts? And it tells it in a, for example, in a square meter of plasterboard or in a linear meter of pipe. So it goes really dedicated to what's the what we call embodied impact of that piece of material. And the indicators that come out of it, it's, for example, energy, water used to manufacture it, how much waste is created. And the one that we will be talking today a little bit more is this carbon, so the embodied carbon. But it also has other impacts. So like the impacts on the ozone layer, on acid rain, on algae bloom, or smoke that is created due to its manufacturing and use. So there is a lot of environmental impacts that come in the assessment of within an EPD. So this is the general information. You put all sorts of things in information inside the model, and it tells you the impact per unit of material. So talking a little bit about life cycle, what do I mean by that? So it's basically looking at the entire part of the life cycle from the beginning where you get your materials and it goes into manufacturing. So there is CO2 emitting just by bringing those raw materials and manufacturing that product. Then this product goes into a construction site. So if I put the example of a house, the first part we would be making gyp. Then you bring this gyp board into a construction site and you turn it into a wall. So it's actually you're turning it into something else. And then you finish making the house with all the other materials. And it also has, during this use phase, it also has some embodied carbon. So for this, I mean, if you have carpet and needs to be replaced during the years that that house will be in service, that also counts towards embodied carbon. Or if you need to add another layer of paint, that also accounts for embodied carbon. What does not count as embodied carbon is what we call operational carbon on the use of the house. So that would be the electricity that you use, for the fridge connected, or heating the house, or your hot water. Any of those emissions related on using it, that's not part of embodied carbon. But if you need to do any maintenance or repair of materials, that still counts towards the embodied carbon of that material. And of course, end of life. So end of life cycle, you need to deconstruct, hopefully, and not just demolish and go into landfill, but there is, or maybe are able to recycle it. So you need to consider from raw materials to end of life. This is all the information that goes into a life cycle assessment. And this is when it's then displayed in an environmental product declaration. So this is how the modules, how they are called within an EPD, that consider it within the entire life cycle assessment. So it's pretty much similar to the graph that I've just showed you. So you have like the first modules, A1 to A3. So that's the product stage. So that's what we would also call cradle to gate, because basically it goes into the gate of your manufacturing site. Then you have cradle to practical completion, which is the entire module A1 to A5. And then it goes until your thing is finished. So if you are building a new water treatment plant, then is when it finishes, because it's practical completion, it's going to get started. And then you have your user stage and then your end of life. So for end of life, you call it cradle to grave. And this is basically the end of your life cycle. Some EPDs also disclose what we call the module D, which is these benefits beyond the life cycle. So this is, for example, if you have a piece of steel. So even when you go into the disposal, it's very, very likely it's going to get recycled because it still has high value. So by recycling it, it actually provides some advantages instead of using virgin steel. So you can also start disclosing those benefits in this module D of the EPD. So basically, like the EPD is put into all sorts of stages following the life cycle in a very well-defined manner. So all those modules are consistent across all EPDs. This way you can make those comparisons. So this is sort of how an EPD results look like. Don't worry, I'll zoom in a little bit, but it's basically a long table. So of a specific product, you get all this information along the life cycle of a product for a very long table, lots of indicators. So if I just zoom in at the top of this table, so these are the results for the EPD results for 1 square meter of color code used in New Zealand. So you can see it's pretty specific on how we go about defining what this means. And in this case, it's in a core of 0.1 mils thickness. So if you look at the first line of this EPD, it's called global warming potential. And this is basically the scientific name of embodied carbon, if we would need to simplify it. So in this case, so if I look at this cell in here, so that's the A1 to A3, so that's the cradle to gate. So when it comes out of the factory, 1 square meter of color code Cinecore has an embodied carbon of 13.9 kgs. So this is how you can start reading EPDs. And this means if you have like for all those materials and you know how many square meters of Cinecore have you used and how many tons of concrete have you used, you can start aggregating it and then understand the embodied carbon of the project, basically. So what's Fletcher Building doing around embodied carbon? So we started working on EPDs several years ago. So we currently have 13. There is one missing in this picture, which actually goes in a lot of the value chain in both residential and commercial projects. We knew that it was a really important thing to do, to disclose all this information, be transparent, and then provide it to our customers, because then they can use that information for their own projects. In terms of carbon, we also have a carbon reduction target of 30% by 2030. It's a science-based target. And this means that as our operations decarbonize, we will be able to see those results into the EPD once we update it. So every time we update an EPD, we will be able to see those improvements that are consequence of our decarbonization projects. And just really quickly, another reason, yes, we do it because it's the right thing to do, and we want to decarbonize and help New Zealand move in the right direction, but customers are also asking for it. Maybe a few years ago, it was more a difficult thing, but nowadays, a lot of the customers are asking for it. So this is an example from Waka Kotahi, and one explicit statement that they put is projects worth more than $100 million will aim to reduce construction emissions by at least 10%, with suppliers encouraged to look for more ways to even more greater reductions in carbon. So to be able to achieve those reductions, you need to know what they are and how they are. So those EPDs will help make the right decisions. And the same as water care, one of the enterprise model that Matt talked at the beginning, they are aiming for 40% reduction of carbon in construction, which is not an easy target, but it's good because it's ambitious, and then we can all do it together. So again, having all that information from those EPDs, you are able to understand the direction of travel. So just to finalize, I know it was a really quick 101 on EPDs, but basically, if you need to take home some messages, embodied carbon accounts from the emissions of the material during its entire life cycle. EPDs can provide information, including embodied carbon, but also all sorts of other. And this information is science-based, standards compliant, and independently verified. So it's a robust document. And one of the reasons we are doing it is because customers are really asking for it. So we believe it's the right thing to do and to actually move New Zealand in the right direction. And that was me, man.
Hey, thank you, Ferran. You've got through a lot there.
Sorry.
Very efficiently. No, well done, well done. Hey, and look, if you do have any questions for Ferran, do put them in the chat. That was, as he mentioned, a quick fly through. But in terms of the technical scene set, then that's hopefully a really useful start. So, Tony from Green Vision, welcome. And changing gears a little bit to talk about a specific provider.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And great presentation, Ferran. That was a lot of information, and it will help me with mine. My presentation is a little bit more focused in terms of it's on a product and sort of focusing around the options around recycling. So I'll share my screen and get that going. Right. So yeah, I'm Tony from Green Vision. We're a recycling company that's based in Onehunga. We've been around for about 10 years. I've been with the company for 3 years, but what I've really noticed in the last 18 months in particular, there's a real focus on reducing embodied carbon in projects, and the adoption of options to do that. Green Vision is part of Downer. While we serve the Downer business, we also serve the rest of the market, Fletcher's and Fulton Hogan, etc., to help meet their sustainability goals. So it's all around the decarbonisation strategy, where we're trying to focus in on environmental sustainability and government goals that then transfer into other projects, and in particular infrastructure within the Auckland region at this stage. Now, our EPD journey started probably 2 years ago, where we producing a recycled product, we wanted to know, did it actually reduce the amount of carbon produced versus comparable products. So to Ferran's point, it's not to judge, but it's an ability to compare. And so when we do a third party verified document, that way it's a non sort of biased document that can put out, and it's out in the public arena. For our particular part of the journey, it starts from the A1 to A3, as Ferran pointed out earlier on, and it becomes when it comes off the crushing process and gets loaded out, The method is taken from an international working group, technical working group, and then so everybody comes off the same basis. What we've used the document for is to promote the use of recycled crushed concrete as a lower embodied carbon option versus other aggregates, so it can be used for smaller projects. What we've found in the past is, say, if there's a larger project that's using the ISC model, of the Mott McDonald model of working out carbon, that's great for the larger projects, but for the smaller projects where people or consultants want to have a look at a document that gives them some information so they can have a look at baseline, they can have a look at our EPD. Back to Fran's great presentation. The main figure that you want to have a look at is the embodied carbon footprint, or the global warming potential. And so for our particular product on the recycled crushed concrete, that is at 0.27 kgs per carbon dioxide equivalent per tonne. So it's based on a per tonne basis. So that's when you compare it against other products, that gives you a good baseline of what the savings are. What I've kind of started to notice is I get a lot more companies that are producing, say, concrete products, having conversations with me about, well, what does it mean for their product as they manufacture it, and then how do they potentially complete the story by bringing it to an organisation such as Green Vision for recycling, and how can that expand their their sustainability story. So that's great, and I look forward to, if anybody's on the call that wants to have those conversations, please do get a hold of me, and we can have a bit of a chat about how we can facilitate either collecting and bringing material to us, or bringing it into us, and then what the recycling options are, and what we can then how we can improve an outcome by using recycled crushed concrete. In terms of the other products that we're producing on our site, we recycled asphalt, which goes back into hot mix asphalt. And when we're in the process of going through the environmental product declaration for those products as well, so then you can baseline those. But we also we take in basalt material from construction sites. A lot of it, some of it gets used for making barriers, but some of it goes out to our landfill. So we're giving them an option about how to bring it in, and how we can crush it up for reuse as a substitute for graded products. On this page, I've provided a calculation down the bottom. So by, as mentioned, using the RCC EPD, you can calculate the reduction in carbon emissions, and it shows the difference between the global warming potential compared to a comparable, say, aggregate product is up to 75%. And that can then be calculated into what difference it would be in terms of across, say, in this instance for the calculation, a 20,000 tonne parcel of material. So it shows that you can save up to 105,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent by using that. The other benefit of using recycled materials is that there is actually some price point difference in the marketplace. So while you don't have any reduction in performance of the material, you certainly you get a benefit of price reduction as well, which is kind of unusual. Most recycled products, that actually adds cost to it. So it's a good story in terms of that. Just focusing again on the third-party verified. It is to provide an unbiased view of embodied carbon when comparing products, so it's a good document for use for when you're looking at your projects. The table down the bottom there just shows some price points, and some calculations using the above carbon equivalents for similar products, and then how it comes to the 105,000 kgs. That's my presentation. It's very, very short compared to Farhan, but thanks very much for your time today. and appreciate any questions that might come.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Tony. And some of the discussions we've been having quickly in Australia, they have a starting point with a lot of their roading, don't they? Where they say, hey, you need to really start with thinking about recycled products first, as opposed to virgin materials, and that price difference that comes from those centres, recycling centres being so much closer to the urban centre, can really start to drive our thoughts, can't it?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. A great point, Matt.
Yeah, nice. No, look, we'll look out for whatever questions come back in your direction, Tony.
Thanks
Thank you for that. And yeah, and up number 3rd is Conrad from Auckland Council. So welcome, Conrad, and over to you. I think, Conrad,
Right.
you had the
Yep.
challenge of an inspirational ending.
Yeah, I think that was right. Matt, is that screen coming up now? It's showing on screen? Excellent, thank you. Kia ora koutou. I'm Conrad Heidemann from Healthy Waters, sit in the Sustainable Value team there in Healthy Waters. I was given the challenge of an inspirational ending, and I'll try. We'll see how we go. But I think the one thing I can do is try to give a bit of a client perspective on this, and to see where we can be involved in this process as well. Obviously, we're on a journey to reach a more low carbon future, and a huge part of that, we're aware, is engaging with our supply chain. What we've found with Healthy Waters, most of the work that we do in terms of our carbon footprint, it sits in that scope 3 area. So engaging with our supply chain and getting and helping our supply chain to reduce their carbon footprint is a real big deal for us. So I'll jump into that. So I thought I would be good to start with a bit of a mention of why this is all important to us. I think we're all very familiar with the recent flooding events that we've had. Here's a few images that I'm sure everyone's probably familiar with from seeing what they've seen on the news and so on through social media. And I think we can probably all agree that we're now starting to see the impacts of climate change. And because of this, we've got to do something about it. We can't just carry on doing what we've done before. Continuing in that way is only going to lead to more of these sorts of issues. And finding a way to reduce our carbon footprint is a key aspect. We're probably in that zone now. We're going to have to start looking at a lot more adaptation and not just mitigation. But I'm a firm believer that we need to continue with the mitigation work hand in hand with the adaptation. So that's sort of a scene setting for me, is that, you know, this is the problem that we've got. I can tell you my own personal experience at Healthy Waters is kind of 100% focused on the response to the flooding that we've had in the last little while, and will continue to be so for quite some time. So this really is the focus for me. So a little bit about what Healthy Waters does, who Healthy Waters is and what we do. So effectively, we're responsible for the maintenance of the stormwater asset for the region of Auckland. For those of you that aren't within Auckland and don't know what Healthy Waters is, that's us. We're basically the stormwater department. We obviously have our areas of strategy and planning that go on. We also have operations and delivery, and it's probably those last two, operations and delivery, that will have the most use out of this discussion, out of EPDs. Because they're the areas of the business that are focused around physical works and have physical works elements going on in it. So the reason I put that picture on the screen is, first of all, it's pretty, but it is an example of an alternative method, and I think that's really what we're here to discuss is capturing the benefits of those alternative methods. So this is the Awakeri wetlands out in Takanini. The area some of you will be familiar with, it has peat soils. Traditionally, we would look to pipe this area to provide the network for the development that goes on around it. But the solution here was to retain a wetland, a watercourse, which helps keep the groundwater level at a level where we're not draining away those peat soils. The key thing here is that this project had a significant reduction in carbon through using this technique, and that's what we are wanting to see. You know, more wider thinking, more alternatives, and bring these alternatives into the project work that we do. So how does Healthy Waters go about delivering this stuff? We have very recently started a new delivery model within Healthy Waters. As you can see on the screen, there's quite a lot there. It's made up of 14 different work streams, and it will run for up to 6 years. And the key thing is it provides our suppliers with a greater visibility of the forward workload within those work streams. And that gives us an opportunity to look at that work and then find ways to do that work better. And I think in particular during the design phase, we've got the greatest opportunity to make good carbon reductions and to come up with better solutions, lower carbon solutions earlier on in the design phase. And that's a focus for us within Healthy Waters, is to try to get that happening within the design phase. But we acknowledge there's also opportunities during the tendering and construction phases as well, where different materials and processes and technologies can be brought in. So within the program delivery model thing we just showed you, we've got a range of KPIs for our suppliers. They include the standard cost and performance kind of KPIs, but also have a range that are based around our sustainable outcomes, which is sort of what you can see on the screen at the moment. And in terms of carbon, we've got a long-term goal for the whole program of attempting to reduce by 50% our carbon footprint, and we've then sort of tried to chunk that down and have more somewhat easier to achieve targets for our initial years. So our first year goal is just to make sure that every project that we have has a low carbon option being developed for the design. So we've at least got an option within the project which is a reduced carbon one. We'll also use a range of tools so to track this information, and that'll be the mechanism by which the suppliers are able to demonstrate that they are meeting the KPI. So Healthy Waters utilise the Mawara Carbon Portal, which is developed by Mott McDonald. So we've been working in partnership with them and Watercare to develop that. And for those that aren't familiar, a real quick summary of it, it's basically a drag and drop wish list of everything you want to add into your project. So you build up effectively a bill of quantities inside the portal, and it tells you how much carbon that project will embody through constructing it. It is based on a range of assumptions and factors that are given by MFE, etc., for the amount of carbon in the activity that we're including into that portal. It is intrinsically assumption based, and for instance, if you have a project in a certain area, it's going to assume how far that area is away from the site that it's bringing the material from. It doesn't make it specific to that. So it's kind of assumption based for the Auckland region. And we've done a lot of work with MOTS and with Watercare as well to try to get those assumptions kind of Auckland regionalised and working for us. And MOTS obviously have also been doing that for the rest of the country as well. Hopefully that's a good enough summary of what the Moana Carbon Portal is. But that's sort of the cornerstone for us of tracking the carbon. And we're developing other tools for this as well with in relation to the program delivery model and the KPIs that we have in there. So we're working on an innovation register, and we're working on a waste minimisation tracker as well. And effectively, they will fit all together to be able to demonstrate how the supplier is going with the with meeting these KPIs, but also the suppliers will be able to use them as the tools to reduce the carbon, reduce the waste within the project that they're working on. Yeah. So on this slide, I wanted to demonstrate how and where the EPDs can be applied into our process. So this is basically what our process looks like. It starts with a strategic assessment and a business case phase, which effectively develops a concept. And at that point, we do an initial assessment in the Moana Carbon Portal to determine how much carbon will be embodied by that project. So that's at a relatively high level, and obviously very assumption based on what that project's going to be, because we know it's going to develop through the design. That design then gets handed over to a designer within the program that we've got. The intention is that there will be a lot of early contractor involvement, and the contractors and designers are very much encouraged to seek input from the supply chain deeper down as well. So we're aiming to get as much input from everyone out there during that design phase, because we know that at the earliest stages of the design, that's our opportunity to really bring the carbon down in a project. So we're wanting to see that innovation coming in as early as possible. Going back to the Awakiri example, the options that were on the table was to pipe that area or to look at an open channel and wetland design. That decision was made extremely early in the process, and obviously you're not going to get that kind of carbon saving if you come in at the tendering for the physical works end. We need to make those decisions much earlier on. So key thing is to try to get that happening, that low carbon thinking happening as early in the design process as possible. And the Moana Carbon Portal is an excellent tool for being able to develop that. So yeah, as the design progresses through preliminary and detailed design, we're seeking to get more and more involvement from the contractors and suppliers. And this is where, if we have an alternative product with an EPD, we can bring that in and feed that into the carbon portal to give us the hopefully reduced amount of carbon for that project. We then move into the tendering and construction phase, where we'll shift to a different tool, which is something for the contractors that estimate the carbon given their actual construction methodology, and then track it throughout the construction process. And ultimately, all of this information needs to kind of be fed back into our libraries of information that sit inside the carbon portal, so that we've kind of got a closed loop system with all of that information going back, so that we're baselining our new projects based on our current information, not on information from 2 or 3 years ago. So if we know we've got a new technique that works, that reduces carbon, that's the one that we want to be using, or a new material, we want to be using that in our baselining, and seeking continuous improvement from that point onwards, driving us on that journey to a 50% reduction throughout this program. And I think it's kind of overlaying that point, but that's our opportunity to create new norms. You know, if we know we've got one supplier that's doing this project or this activity well, we want to feed it back into our system so that we're sharing that with all of our suppliers and saying, hey, this is the way we're doing it from now on. That creates our new norm, and we continue to improve from that point forward. So yeah, we can then take that information from the carbon portal and from our actual tracking and multiple other sources as well, and feed that into a carbon dashboard. And we're currently in the process of developing this with Mott MacDonald as well. What this dashboard will do is it'll allow us to track and forecast our carbon into the future. So on the left-hand side in the blue is past information that we're tracking. On the right-hand side in the orange, it's what we're forecasting for those projects. So this is still currently in development, and it's showing some kind of funny results there. When we get this up and running fully, we'll be able to show our full project workload in there. And what we hope that it is going to show is that over the period of time that we're looking at, we're seeing a forecast reduction in the carbon. So it gives us that opportunity to include our initiatives that we're looking at doing through the roadmap, which we are also developing. As you can tell, we're sort of just starting this, getting things going. We're developing a roadmap, and we'll incorporate the initiatives from that roadmap into the forecasting here, and be able to show how those initiatives will have an impact on the carbon for the work that we do. The dashboard also will help us in ways that it will highlight and identify hotspots throughout our program of where we're really having a lot of carbon, and then we can obviously do something about that. And again, if we can, because we can drill down onto this into a project view, if we can identify a particular project where something is being done that resolves or reduces the amount of carbon, we can then share that with other similar projects and see that coming across. I think the important connection here with the EPDs is that the Motto Carbon Portal will do our forecasting all based around assumptions, but we need to make sure that we're getting something at the end which is about our actual values. So we're wanting to see the best information available, and that's going to come from an EPD in many cases, how that impacts on the amount of carbon for that particular project, and hence we see that reduction. So that's sort of the connection there. And then I think the important thing about this is this information, us being aware of this information and being able to demonstrate it and see it properly and share it, gives us the opportunity to incentivize the supply chain to do this sort of work. And I think that's probably the key thing to bring across is that's our intention, is that we want to be supporting the suppliers out there that are doing positive things on the ground that support the outcomes that we're after. So if it's possible for you to demonstrate that you've got a low carbon solution, then we're very keen to work with you and to continue to work with you in the future. So that gives us the opportunity of making sure that there's sort of a continuity of work around, maybe an existing project moves to another phase. We want to keep you on board because you're doing well with keeping that carbon down. It will help out during the tender phases because you can demonstrate that you've got a low carbon result. And I think the other thing that we're really keen to look into is our opportunity to support your investment into a lower carbon process or methodology. If you can demonstrate that you've got a lower carbon option, we're keen to try to find ways in which we can provide you more continuity of work to use that new technique into the future. So, you know, that's a discussion we're really keen to have with our suppliers. So an example of that, I think a really rudimentary one is if there's a piece of plant that that you need to purchase and it's going to be you know, several $100,000. In order to make that investment, you're going to want to know that you've got a continuity of work. Well, we want to know that that's the right piece of kit that needs to be brought into the country. It doesn't exist at the moment. If those things marry up, let's have that conversation about how can we work towards providing you that continuity of work. I think a way of saying that is it's like, what's the business case for your investment? If the business case is we've got a line of work to help you out with, then it's going to help with that business case. Very keen to reward our suppliers who have the same goals as us. So finally, and I guess this is my rather weak stab at inspiration. Here's another photo of a project that Healthy Waters was involved in. This is the Te Awanga Awa out in Mount Roskill, and this probably isn't the best photo of it, but it's an important photo because it's taken only hours after the floodwaters had receded from here. So we had floodwaters up to at least up to the stream banks, and we are aware that it probably went significantly beyond that. So this was, we know that in the morning it was the water was up to the stream banks of this stretch of the Awa, and this was taken early in the afternoon where it's receded down again. And what I find really impressive about this is you can see that the some of the vegetation's been laid a little bit flat, which is exactly what it was designed to do. But here this asset's just bouncing back, and it's only hours after it was in flood. These are it's another representation of the kind of alternatives that we're after, and without these sorts of conversations about how do we prove that we've got a better alternative, we're not going to see solutions like this coming to the fore. So I'm hoping to see a lot more of these sorts of projects. I'm hoping to see a lot more alternatives shown to us of ways in which we can do a low carbon approach. I'm really keen to see lots of other things other than just low carbon, because we have a stack of sustainable outcomes, which most of our suppliers are very familiar with. But I'm really keen to see stuff in the low carbon and the waste minimization area coming through, where we're not just building things like we've done for the last 50 years. We know we need to change. Let's change in the right way. That's me.
Hey, thank you, Conrad. Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's wonderful and such a great image to finish on. And picking up a few things that you've said there, your long-term commitment to your partners to work together, the importance of having everybody around the table to be making the best decisions early in the project life cycle. Yeah, absolutely. And support to saying, hey, if you've got a solution out there that you might need some assistance in investing in that comes from your business case, come and have a discussion. I think that for all of us in the supply chain and in the wider partnership, as we unlock these complex challenges, is exactly the sort of narrative we need to say, hey, we're in this together. How can we help each other to collaborate? Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, we've got a few questions and I'd love to have the chance to get to them. There was just while you're here, and Conrad, maybe Tony and Fredan can just jump back online too, but the dashboard data, I think you did mention that it was a mock-up at this stage and people weren't to read too much into it. I think that was a takeaway for that specific.
Yeah. We're still working through. We're still getting it up and running. It's getting there. I think we're looking at sort of Yeah, end of this financial year, so middle of the year, we should have that up and running, and I'll be really excited to be able to share it properly at a later time and run through the wider carbon portal input to it as well.
Yeah, and on the carbon portal, there's a question here about how it takes into account the end of life. So that module D section, and my understanding, and play this back to me, would be it does make assumptions about end of life positions, but that's where moving to the actuals at some point you need to make that transition from the assumptions that are in the model. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's you got to draw the line on it somewhere, I guess. What we're trying to do is make sure that our designers are entering in sufficient information in there so that it's capturing the whole of life for that solution. Generally, our solutions, we're not anticipating the deconstruction of them due to the nature of stormwater assets that tend to be enduring. The thing that we're trying to capture in there is, well, what do we need to do when that, for instance, and there's obviously that still play a massive part in our network. We've got a lot of concrete pipes. What do we do when that concrete pipe reaches the end of its service life? So you put in an asset which is easy to reline, that's going to have an advantage. Potentially we put in an asset slightly too big, because then we can reline it. We're getting more life out of it before we need to dig it up and put a new one in. It's that sort of thinking is probably where we've got to. And we have the advantage that we're not really looking at like a building or something where you're going to think, well, this eventually will be pulled down and a new one built. We're probably more in the area of, okay, let's build something that we can keep going, maintain and keep going for a lot longer period of time.
Yeah, brilliant. And that leads us across a couple of questions or points back to yourself, Tony, around the details from your EPD, and both perhaps to yourself and then to Farhan, just around where do people go to source EPDs? Where do they find that information? Maybe to yourself, Tony?
Yeah, in terms of what resources are available to actually start the journey or engage and get one underway? Is that the question?
Well, I suppose where would you find the library of EPDs that are publicly available, and it's the best place for them to get hold of yours?
Yeah, well, I don't actually have the answer to your question, Matt, but that's a good question. At the moment, our EPD's been held just on our website, but in terms of where's a centralised library, maybe that could be held with Auckland Council at some point in time, or some of the organisations such as NZ Water. But at that stage, yeah, it's a really good question, but I don't quite have the answer at the moment.
Sorry, I can follow up with this one. All the EPDs that have been published within the EPD Australasian framework, which I believe, Tony, your ones is too, they are all published in the EPD Australasia website. So you can just go there and all of the ones that they have been through, because there is different programs, but I would imagine most of the ones that we have been doing in New Zealand and Australia follow within the EPD Australasia. So they are all public in there. The interesting thing, it's a really fast moving space. So nowadays you can download the PDF basically with all those tables. But I know that there is on the near future that all that will become digital data. So all our nice PDFs will disappear, and it's just all going to be data that can be learned, like read by machines directly. So like it will be able to just directly input into other systems and calculators and things like that. In a few years, it's not coming soon, but it's on the horizon. Yeah. But in the moment, if you want any EPD Australasia, Google it, they're all there.
Yeah, nice. And Farhan, another question for you perhaps. What's the difference in short version between an EPD and a life cycle assessment, if you were to give the elevator pitch on those two things?
Yes, so you do a life cycle assessment, which generates a lot of information. And then the EPD, in a simpler manner, is just a way how those indicators are displayed that are consistent into, that so you can compare different products. So basically, you always need to do an LCA. That's the process, that's the assessment. And basically, the results are translated into the document, which is the environmental product declaration. Yes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if you were talking about, say, from a project perspective, the EPD would represent the component parts that you're bringing forth, and the life cycle assessment would be for the entire facility, perhaps.
Well, you can do a life cycle assessment of the product, then you get that number, and then you can do a life cycle assessment of a project, and then the EPDs will be part of that information that fits into the life cycle assessment of the project. Yeah, so you can do multiple life cycle assessments in the different scale. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, great. No, look, hey, that's brilliant, guys. I'm conscious of time. Look, certainly the slides will be available. That was a question, and there will be a copy of this recording available through Water NZ. So we'll make sure that that's available. If I could just jump back to a couple of things quickly. One of the things in terms of follow-up, so we're going to have another session in May where we're going to dig a little bit deeper, and ThinkStep are a really useful advisory group in this space. So they're going to give us some information around how to prepare an EPD and a bit deeper dive there. Golden Bay Cement has on a number of iterations, and it's done some really neat things, like Conrad was talking about, driving carbon out of their process manufacture through joint investment. So there's a really great story there from a New Zealand Inc. perspective around how the Golden Bay Cement process is evolving. And we'll hopefully have a client perspective from Queenstown District Lakes, I hope, as well, in that session in mid-May. So that'll be available like this one through Water NZ. And then we want to take a slightly different approach at the Water NZ conference in October and just have a bit of a chance to interact with those suppliers that might have EPDs, particularly to hear those stories about how are you using the EPD to chase carbon out of your process, and how might we work together in terms of sharing those stories and encouraging each other and look for that joint investment that Conrad was talking about. So the conference will be a great chance to talk about that. If you want any more detail, Leslie at Water NZ is a great contact for that. Oh, sorry, I'm not presenting, but finally, I'd just like to say thank you and wrap up with back to the karakia again to close off our time together. So thank you. Tutuia mai irangi, tutuia mai iraro, tutuia mai iroto, tutuia mai iwaho, kia tu au, tu mori tu, tu mori ora, kia tato, humie, huie, tahikie. So thank you so much for the presenters, and thank you for your time today. Cheers.